I want to be at a friend's funeral, not have to lie about their life. Like, the sad thing about building this Noble Father community is one day we will say goodbye to members. And I want to be there and tell their families what kind of man this person was.
Today, I'm with Theophilus. Theo?
Theophilus. It's great. Yeah, Theo. My mom hates it, but yeah.
And he strives to be a man after God's own heart. He's married, and he's the father of a 10-year-old son, a 7-year-old daughter, lives in Canada, and he's the founder of the Noble Father membership community, and he's also active in ministry in China. He loves to off-road, to camp in a Toyota 4Runner.
Don't tell them I'm a Tesla guy. I was a Tesla guy.
And he loves doing ice plunges and reading books. And so I want to welcome you to the Father and Friend Show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I want to start out by just asking you about your own background. If you can just tell us a story about one or two of the most impactful life events that shaped you as a father.
Yeah, and I don't have a contrast when it comes to my faith, because growing up, being born into a family of, my parents were both in Bible college to become pastors. So I was born at the Bible college. And so, usually when you're born into that, you're
literally at the Bible college?
At the Bible college, yeah. It's called Three Hills, Alberta in Canada here. Not a lot of people there.
In the classroom or?
No, it was at the hospital. I wish it was in the classroom. That would be extra special. But yeah, before I even knew what it meant to be a Chinese, before I knew what it meant to be a Canadian, what it meant to be a Christian, 3 years of age, parents moved us all to Venezuela, and we spent 7 years there. My dad was a church there. He was the first Chinese to be sent out by the MB convict, and we were there for 7 years. And so here I was in a foreign country now, learning a new language. And so, identity is this thing, that the topic that every Christian should, it's still to this day is one of those things that you're like, who am I? When you're answering that question, it was very difficult for me, because even when I finally got a grasp of what life in Venezuela was like, 10 years away, moved back to Canada, and then got to find friends again, got to understand culture again. I knew English, but still, I was just a sore thumb everywhere I went. And so I'd say that was probably the biggest thing. And then when it came to going into life, like, Lord, what am I supposed to do here? Like, what did you put me on this planet to do? Man, I was fumbling for a lot of things, trying a whole bunch of things, and all of it was just to escape the real question, which is, who are you? Like, what did I put in you from the very beginning? Before you even born, what were the things that I gave you? And man, when I finally stopped running away from myself and running away from God, that's when, you find pieces, and you're like, oh wow, this is why you wanted me to undergo that, understand this, and do this discovery of my own identity to find where God actually wants me to be. And so here I am today.
Yeah, that's neat. I moved from Scotland to America when I was 10. And I remember when I went to college, I met another person who had moved from another country to America about the same age range. And he mentioned this idea of, what do they call it? It's not third generation. I don't think it is. Third culture, I think, maybe something like that. But it's this idea that and now I spoke English in Scotland, so I didn't have the language barrier challenges, but I certainly had some of the cultural barrier challenges, or the meeting new people challenges, and some of the things that come along with that. But the idea is that for many people who have a similar story to yours, they see that they don't fit into their original culture, and they don't fit into the culture they moved to.
Yeah.
And so they feel sort of in between two things, that they don't quite fit well into either one.
Right.
And so I think even more so, to your point of having that feeling of, what am I doing? What is my purpose?
Yeah, and there was a time where I moved to China too, and I lived there for a few years, and that's where I met my wife and had my son. And like, that was also a crazy thing, because you might look Chinese, but I couldn't speak the language, I couldn't read or write, And I was also bringing actually teams of Americans and Canadians and actually many from Texas. You know, when you'd be walking down the street and these kids would want to get to know these people that we're with, and like Justin Bieber or Hollywood, or say whatever English words they know. And then they try to respond, and these people would look at me like I could translate for them, but I didn't even know how to speak. I didn't even know how to write my own name. So like, I'm just like this alien, this unicorn as well. And yeah, that's a good point. The reason why I like Batman so much is because it was hard to find people who understood the pain. And I guess when you know that pain, you can either turn that into villainy, or you can turn that into helping people avoid that pain. And that's why building Noble Father and bringing fathers together, finding the people who are like in the fringes and bringing them together. That's where I found myself. And that's why I said, wow, Lord, you had me undergo that pain for this very reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really fantastic. So let's talk about that for a minute. You mentioned Noble Fatherhood. So why don't we just jump into that? The Noble Father community that you've got, what is that about?
Yeah, so when I ventured into coaching, I love holding space. I love listening to people. I love connecting with people, and I love drawing things out of people and developing people. And coming out of COVID, I had already started my coaching practice, and I asked God, like, who did you want me to serve? Like, what was the demographic of people you want me to serve? And I really felt like this, like, man, fathers is who you're called to serve. And you know, because in helping a father, I'm helping him, you know, create a better future for his kids, but then his kids, the future that they lead is going to be the ones that my kids are raised in. And so, you know, in COVID, obviously Zoom was a big thing, and video conferencing like this was a big thing. And so I was in a bunch of Facebook groups for dads, and these are groups that have like hundreds of thousands of dads. And I felt like even though I have a good community here with church friends and my family and all these things, I felt like as a father, there was still a bit like lacking. Like I just didn't have those conversations, and it just wasn't intentional social networking, I guess you could say. And in being in those Facebook groups, you see a lot of this toxicity, and you see the conversations that are being had in those spaces. A lot of
It's amazing to me, some of the things that get said in those groups. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, please don't listen to that guy's advice.
Oh yeah, and I'm right.
Yeah.
Now the moderator in those groups. Yeah, I'm moderator in those groups. So, you know, the things you see are things that get approved, but the things that don't get approved, I see them too. And so, like, man, it was a lot of cheating this, and a lot of, you know, and I just felt like, you know, and you probably would agree, and most of your listeners probably would agree, is that, you know, they say it's social media, but do you really feel like it's connecting us on a deeper, more intentional level? And so, you know, if I was feeling that pain out of COVID, right, and we're all isolated and told not to, you know, interact with one another, I was like, well, why don't we just create a Zoom and bring these dads together? And so I made a post, and it's like 8 guys came out. There's 9 of us in total, and really the main prompt was just, hey, like, what do you need to get off your chest, right? And very first guy, his name is John, starts his share by saying, I've never told anybody this, and just started breaking down, just started crying and sharing his heart with us. And that really set the tone for us, and we just never stopped meeting. Actually, you know, we're about to hit 4 years together at the end of this month, meeting weekly, talking. And so that has developed into kind of a membership community, because, and really it did a disservice to the community more than anything. And when fathers don't, you know, put in something, they don't get anything out of it. And so we've grown to now being 45, 46 members in our community. And man, we just meet every single week, talk about, you know, God will give me prompts, or, you know, things in my own life I'll share, and we'll talk around it and update each other on life. And that's going to doing masterminds. And we also do in-person retreats. And so it wasn't just about, let's get on a call together. It was, let's get on a call together, get to know each other, but also like make it to a point to be intentional and do retreats together where we're, you know, be in each other's presence. And, you know, I intended it as a ministry to begin with. You know, it was always a business, and we've had a lot of fathers make that journey of faith as well, you know, because they see it spending time with, you know, other brothers, and you know, the saying that, you know, when the tide, you know, raises, then the boats rise with it. And so everybody's average goes up, and And man, like the 7 domains that we'll talk about here, growing fathers in those domains, like you don't want to be left behind when you're in the presence of other guys who are doing it as well. So,
so with that, you then utilize some of the things you talk about in that group, both for the benefit of the men, but also for the benefit, I imagine, of your own family. You grow also in the process of participating and hearing what dads are saying. I want to talk about some of the things, but I do want to jump into some of the things that you mentioned you do with your own family. And one of those things was pursuing your own dreams so your kids can see how to do it. You want to show them what it means to live, not just tell them how to live.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. We talked before about putting on the mask first for the sake of your children. So tell me about that.
Yeah, nobody wants to be a hypocrite. Nobody wants to tell their kids how to do it. Good example of this was, jujitsu. My son got into it with a friend of ours at the school, and I was on the sidelines like saying things. I watch UFC with my friends, and so I think I have some kind of expertise. But when you're not in the ring, like, and you're not in the arena, you can't tell the gladiator how to fight. You have to be in it too. So, join that as well, and his friend's dad was also doing it, so we kind of had this like father-son thing going on for a while. But like it's very much like you want to, I rather not just tell them about it and rather just pursue it and show them how it's done, because I think it's not something that is taught, right? It's not taught, it's caught, right? And I don't want to be at that place where one day I tell them that their dreams are important when I live this life of regret and I'm at my deathbed and thinking what could have been and what I should have done or I could have done. And if God's placed these things within us, like we have an obligation, I think, to pursue them, right? Is God going to bless us either way? I think so, but like he's given us this all these gifts. You're gonna bury them. That's the talents, right? You're gonna bury them. I'd rather not bury them. I'd rather be told. I tried my best to maximize them. Could double it 3 times, 6 times.
How do you think? So with that, how do you think that you can have one man who pursues his dreams for his own self-interest and destroys his family, and you can have another man who pursues his dreams for the good of his children and the family thrives? What's the difference between those two?
Wow. I think that the answer from that would be, who is it serving ultimately? Right? Because a topic that I touched on for my coaching was life purpose, actually. And I hear a lot of like ideas whenever you ask guys, like, what do you want to do? A lot of them would be like, I want to be a video game streamer, or I want to be this. It's this. I want to be a YouTuber, or some kind of like. And not that I don't believe them. I'm not saying that there aren't Christian gamers who have a good following or have a ministry. But obviously, if you're not a Christian listening to this, we would have a differing opinion. But if God has given us these gifts for us to multiply, if you're a non-believer, you wouldn't have that conversation. You wouldn't even care about what he's given you. You can just throw whatever you want at a barn, and that would be it for you. But I guess if you have that faith and that component in your life, and you understand that there was a creator who gave you these gifts for you to multiply them, you have an obligation to go and maximize them. And so, yeah, I don't know, man, that's an insane question. I don't know if I could answer that really.
I think you're onto something though, as far as it's like the object of why you're doing it. And so we talked about that analogy of putting your mask on first. And I've heard that analogy before, but I've heard it slightly twisted. At least I think of it as twisted.
Okay.
And it goes something like this. You're flying in a plane and the oxygen mask comes down. You have to put your mask on first because you need to love yourself first, right? And that's the same story, but a very, very different way to think about why you would do one thing versus why you put your mask on. Because in the way we're talking about it, you don't put your mask on so you can love yourself first. You put your mask on because you know that to steward what God's given you, i.e. your life, is the only way that you can actually love others. And so it's a means to doing something that's better and greater. It's not the end in and of itself. To love oneself isn't the end goal. It's a pathway to serve God and love others.
Right. Yes. I guess to sum that up is like heart. And I think God cares about that heart. Yeah. We talked about this actually is the giving ourselves of the best, giving yourself the best, knowing that giving ourselves the best actually helps us provide for our family better, as opposed to giving them the best and leaving the crumbs for ourselves. I think fatherhood is this self-sacrificial thing. Yeah. In some ways, but also it's realizing that why does the lion take the lion's share is because he's the brunt of the muscle, right? Or another analogy I like to give is an icebreaker, right? Like if we're not focused on the front of that ship, destroying this thick ice and paving the way for our families, and we help the ships in the back, which is our kids and our family or whatever, and our ship's falling apart, like we're gonna get stuck in this ice shelf, and this convoy is not going anywhere. And so I guess I like thinking about it from those. I'm an analogy guy, so.
Those good analogies are great. Help us understand things.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Yeah, there's certainly that temptation. Our culture is so good at it, just broadly, Western culture at least, telling us to think about ourselves first. And I suppose that's concerns when I hear language about, men putting themselves first. I think of the culture telling us to put ourselves first, how the culture uses it to say you should love yourself. Because I think they say love yourself, but really oftentimes what people mean is put yourself first. Like make yourself the end goal of everything you're doing.
Right.
And in the Bible, Jesus' love isn't putting himself first. I like the definition of love that's something along the lines of self-sacrifice for the good of someone else without expecting something in return.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how to pair those two away for men to pursue. 100% agree with you. I've even seen it in my own life where I've maybe not pursued my own dreams in the name of family obligations or other responsibilities, but I've missed something, and that is the showing, not telling, showing someone how to live
right
a life for the good of others and for God, not just telling them, yes, this is what you should do. I'm just not doing it because I have other responsibilities that I'm really busy with.
Right. I don't want to give your listeners the impression that I have it all together. Like I'm not. I'm just as imperfect as the next guy. Like, dude, it's an everyday thing where I'm like, sometimes I just, while I'm building the business or trying to grow, like we're not in any place like super great financial footing, and catch myself going on job boards and thinking, yeah, maybe there's another alternative or whatever it is. It's an everyday battle. And obviously it comes down to, Lord, what do you want me to do here? Right? You want me to continue on this? Okay, I guess we're continuing on this journey and just trusting that he will bless and provide for us. And you know what? That conversation is one in which I've played out the mental jujitsu. I say mental jujitsu is like, do we trust God to bless us if he's told us to do this thing? Oftentimes we think that there's a security in having this salary or whatever it is. But the sad thing is, you'll hear it from people further on in ages that I missed my opportunity. I didn't take the leap of faith, and now it's too late. Or I wish I'd started sooner, right? You hear those things all the time, and I don't want to be like that.
Yeah, no, I'm in a public speaking group, and there was a question. We sometimes do impromptu questions, and one of the questions, this was months ago, someone asked an older gentleman, what would you do differently if you could go back? And he immediately said, I would have taken more risks. And he specifically meant social risks. Like I would have introduced myself to people. I would have said hi. I would have tried to get to know people.
Wow.
And not been afraid to put myself out there. And he's, 75, 80, right?
Wow.
And, that's just one anecdote. But I think that's, to your point, I think a lot of men get to that age and then go, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm at the end. That was it. Boom. Gone.
Right. Yeah. Even that 75, 80-year-old, I'm sure as a 75, 80-year-old, the generation that his father was in is one in which we went to war, like, or other things. It's just, we just had to figure it out, you know. And we're fortunate to be living when we're living, you know.
Yeah. Your idea of pursuing your own dreams, what does that look like for you specifically? What dreams are you pursuing?
Man, Noble Father, we want to one day have a retreat site where fathers can come in and create memories with their families, doing life together, just like generational impact things. Like, and that conversation changed, right? If you asked me like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, like the dreams that I had were probably some really thing. But now it's like, man, I want to live Noble Father the rest of my life. Because of our community that we talk about a lot is presence and intentionality. And I'm lucky to have good mentors in my life that I see they have kids that are very intentional, and even through the teenage years, when they're typically the most rebellious years, are still very devoted to church, to family, and growing as a unit. And that's my dream, to overcome those. I'm not going to allow those things to steal my joy out of life. I want to be intentional and present through it, and see what that brings to the table. And so, man, that plays out on a grand scale, right? Because then what does it look like when I'm a grandfather? What does it look like when, man, there's just, what does business look like when I'm older, further on in life? I feel like dreams it's hard to grasp, you know, how to answer that question, because I think it's really like, what does God want? You know, it's what does God want? Like, what does God want? I want relationships. I want friendships that last a lifetime. I want to be at a friend's funeral and not have to lie about their life. Like, the sad thing about building this Noble Father community is one day we will say goodbye to members. And I want to be there and tell their families what kind of man this person was. They might not share that side with them. I got to see a side of that. And that pulls on, you know, heartstrings. And I want to be able to see these guys in heaven one day as well, and their families along with them, right? Because what could be more important? My dreams of owning a nicer off-roading vehicle doesn't compare to something like that, you know?
No, so in some ways it's pursuing maybe God's vision for your life, so your kids can see what it's like to pursue God's vision.
Yeah. What helps is understanding that heaven starts today. It's not something that starts whenever I die or whenever Jesus comes back. It's like eternity starts now. And that should change the way we look at our dreams, right? Like, what's important then? Like, what matters now? And I don't say it like I'm great at living like that. Like, yeah, I guess that would be my answer.
Yeah. We talked a little bit before this and at the beginning about purpose and what my purpose is, what your purpose is. And I've been thinking a little bit about this recently, and something came to my mind maybe in the last 2 weeks. And I was sitting at my dinner table looking out the window, and I was just thinking about, like, God, why am I here? Like, what is it? What is the point? And I got this analogy in my mind, and it was, if you go to an art museum and look at a piece of art, we're standing in the gallery, we're looking at this piece of art, and we're wondering, what was the purpose? Like, why did the artist create this piece of art? And we have the tendency, when we're in the art gallery, to maybe read the little sign on the side that gives a 3-sentence explainer from someone, the museum director, and maybe we go to the attendant and we ask the attendant, "Hey, attendant, can you tell me a little bit about this?" Maybe we even go to the internet and we search, tell me about this piece of art. But the only person who really knows why the piece of art was created is the artist. It's the creator. And I was convicted and motivated that if I want to know my purpose, I have to ask the person who created me. Mm-hmm. That's the only person who really knows. Nobody else knows
Right.
Nobody else really, they might be able to give me some insight. They might be able to help me, point me in the right direction, but nobody else really knows why I'm here except God. And maybe God's reason isn't what I want to hear. Maybe it's something I don't like, but still maybe getting to the point where it doesn't really matter if I don't like it, because if God has made me for a purpose, and living in whatever purpose God's made is going to be what's most glorifying to God and most good for me and good for others. If all things work together for the good of those who love God according to his purposes, then, as you pointed out, that's what we want to be doing, is whatever it is God says is the purpose. Let's do that.
Right. And that's where fulfillment comes, right? Like, I'm sure, and like I said, I've tried so many different things and things that I thought would be gratifying or towards fulfillment, right? And man, like, you always have this feeling, this nagging feeling that this isn't it. And for whatever reason, it's just like, as I try to grasp for this success or this money figure or this notoriety or whatever, it just doesn't. It's like your finger just slips every time you're almost there, and then and until I finally did that discovery and asking God, like, what it is you want me to do, like, and then actually embodying it and trusting in that, like, then you realize, wow, like, this is why you had me endure the things that I went through. This is why you call me noble. This is the name Noble Father. Like, I did an identity exchange exercise with Jamie Winship. I don't know if you're familiar with that guy, but I had this experience with God, and I asked him, like, despite all the things that I've done, what do you call me? And he called me noble. And Theophilus in the Bible is most excellent or even noble, right? Noble Theophilus. And the devil instantly will say, no, he never called you that, and you, even by yourself, you say, your first thing is always to reject it. And so a lot of people think, oh yeah, Noble Father is Theo's thing. It's like, no, like, God literally looks at you blameless. Everything you've done, his son already paid for. So he's looking at you like, you're good. You're a noble father. Everybody's a noble father. There's no unnoble father, whatever the opposite word is, but
So with that, in order to be the best steward of whatever God's given, you use the 7 domains of wellness. Can you tell me about that? I'm not really familiar with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, good health is I can look at that as there's 7 domains in which that we are called to steward in our lives. Maybe that's the best way to put it, is a stewardship of 7 domains is physical, which is our physical body. Obviously emotional, we have emotions, and mental is another domain. We have social, which is people around us. We have the spiritual, right? This is a big component for us. Environmental, right? Where we are in our neighborhood, in our community, whatever. And then we have occupational, right? So what we do in our work, what is God calling us to steward in terms of business or career or workplace? Like, there's all of those things you could say are technically ministries, right? The Bible calls our body the church or temple, right? We are called to take care of these 7 things. And so this is one of the things that we do in our community, is this mastermind where we talk about our goals and we hold each other accountable, right? Accountability is this big thing in man development or personal development spaces. And so we're always looking at how do we put to death the boy and forge the man. And so we look at our 7 domains. Every single week we ask ourselves, what are the things we want to work on, and try to grow in those domains, because when we do that, it inevitably rubs off on our children. Case in point, this morning, man, I didn't want to work out. This is the first day of the spring break for my kids, and I'm like, you know what? No, we have to do this. Took off my shirt and started doing it. And man, my son and my daughter just like inevitably started doing it alongside their father in their own way. But still, it's like there is a byproduct of it rubs off on the people around, like my wife as well. She'll sometimes see me and then I'll see her in the room. She's walking on the walking pad again, And so it's that, and it's not just for us, right? Like everything, it's funny because like we're talking about, self-interest or whatever. when we work on ourselves, it actually impacts everything around us, like osmosis into the world almost, right? It's hard for you to spend time around, right? What do you say? What's the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with, right? If you hang out with 5 billionaires, do you think you're going to get poorer or richer? You'll probably get richer, right? You hang around, 5 people that love to, gorge themselves on fast food. Like, what are you going to become? And so that was something that was very apparent for us. Hey, how do we look at what we can track? And when you have the knowledge of these things, like, I got to eat a cheeseburger today. Is this going to help my physical domains? Probably not. And then you just make decisions that not just for yourself, but it impacts your kids. And so that's one of the things we use for our community to think about growth in a more tangible way.
And so you look at that mostly for men to grow in their own maturity in those areas, but also as a way to show your children how to live.
Yeah.
And you mentioned one example of exercise. What's another area where you've seen that be caught by your children?
Yeah. Yeah, the spiritual component, it's the linchpin for everything, obviously for my life and obviously for your life as well. How they see us pray for our friends, how they see us express care for a member of church. These are all things that they're catching. I don't have to do it and then tell them later, did you see Daddy do this thing? I've never done that in my life. And it's not about doing it in a showy way. It's knowing that at any point they could be watching me. And the best way to understand that is watching my father do that as well with other people. You catch what they're doing. And so in the spiritual, praying, like they hear Daddy pray before the meals, before we go to bed, praying before we go to school, seeing me in the Word. This morning, it's funny because we did the workout and my son runs to the room, and while I'm mid push-up, he's got a Bible in his lap and he's like, Daddy, choose a number. Or he tells my daughter to choose a number, and she couldn't come up with a number. And I said 24, and he just opens Psalm 24 and he starts reading Psalm 24. Like, who knew that working on yourself physically would lead to this spiritual development thing that's going on in his mind? Plunging is one of those things that helps with the mental and the emotional. Like, you think every time I stand at the edge of the water, and I do it in a river, which doesn't really give you the thermal barrier, it's harder to do it in those places. But man, my mind is racing and it's telling me you're gonna die, you shouldn't do this, like go back home, like, and it's like, man, you gotta deny yourself and you put that boy to death and you go into the water and you forge that man. And like, those are just areas. And I guess occupational, yeah, that's the dream portion of showing them Daddy's here building this thing, helping fathers. But the dreams that God gives us, I think he doesn't just mean it only for us. He wants it to further his kingdom in his ecosystem. And so, like, it's not just telling my kids about the dreams, but it's also teaching them about ministry, that we can help people in pursuit of our dreams, which is something the world doesn't tell you.
I find that so challenging in a way because I think it's exposing in one way, right? To go, okay, what am I actually doing that would be caught? I think that's a question.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing oneself from the outside and having children has a way to do that automatically, I think.
Yeah.
You go, wait a minute, sounds like me.
Yeah.
So it has a way of doing that, praise God. I think God does that intentionally, right? You're single, then you get married and you have a wife, and if you do it in the right order, of course, you have a wife. And then you have kids. And I think at each step you have this additional layer of exposure that's like, hide from a wife. And then it's like, okay, I really can't hide what I'm really like from my kids. Like, they're just going to become like me. That's all there is to it. And I think that's God's mercy on us, to allow our children to be the kind of accountability that's not replicable. Like, you couldn't ask anybody to be that. They couldn't want to be like you enough that like your kids do.
Yeah.
So it is a mercy, and also a giant pitfall, for those men who never see that. God never shows that to them, to go, yeah, this is your impact right here. You see these kids. Yeah. I find that exposing and in a good way, but I find it challenging because we didn't grow up knowing what the good things were. Kind of back to what I originally told you, that part of this is so that you can know another version of a dad besides your own. When you only know the version of the dad you do, people tend to either do one of two things. We either do what our dad did, or we do the complete opposite in fear of not wanting to be like that person.
Yes. Wow. I did podcasts for 3 years, and that was kind of part of the intro, is like, either you do fatherhood to the best of your ability and you don't let yourself get away with even the smallest little thing, or you do it so bad that they know not to do it like you. I don't feel like there's really any kind of in between, right? I don't like public, and this kid's acting up and throwing a tantrum, and the parents are acting like they don't know this kid. It's like, who do we blame in those situations? You, right? Like, accept that, and they're just their own person. And in reality, dude, when my kid turns 18, it's going to be on me. How I raise them, inconsequential stuff, then they don't have to learn on the really hard things.
Yeah. If you're annoyed by your child, like if your child seems annoying or bothersome to you, you should know that it's all your fault. Like, you're the one who did that.
Right. Right.
Especially when they're very young, because they have had no other influences except you, virtually.
Right.
And so I really appreciated that, because it helped me just take responsibility and go, yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm the problem here.
Extreme ownership. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Just going, look, if someone's going to do something, it's me. And that's it.
Yeah.
Me and my wife, there you go.
Right.
So to your point, I think that's really fantastic. Now, you mentioned the inconsequential and the consequential, and I want to hear about this, because I want to hear what kinds of things you're doing that are inconsequential at a young age that are going to impact them, so that they know how to make decisions when it becomes more important.
Yeah. And I thank the Lord given me a son, right? And it looks different, obviously, for a son and a daughter, right? Inconsequential would be like putting away the dishes. Those are small little things, little responsibilities, trusting my son to walk to school by himself. And, we live close, but, the more consequential things would be like a pocket knife. So my son years ago, he made a very intentional decision to get baptized, and, to celebrate that, I gave him a pocket knife. And so dangerous, but like, man, it provided the opportunity for us to teach him, how to be careful with the knife and how to steward this great responsibility, because this can be great harm to yourself and to other people, and so teaching him that now, and even gun safety, right? Teaching your kids, as opposed to, I can look back on my own life and think, man, my dad didn't walk me through a lot of these things, and conversation about sex. If we're not taught those things, then I'm just going to go explore these things by myself. And man, a lot of those decisions, like, right. And so, this came to a head one time. We were at a men's retreat for our church, and, father came up to me with his son, and he told me that, and the kid was really, really scared and didn't want to tell the story, but eventually told me that my son had pulled the knife on him and was chasing him around the campground with it. And I didn't believe it in my heart right away, right? Like, I was like, that's not my son. Like, he doesn't do that. And finally I went to go have a conversation with him, and, he admitted that he did do it. And man, like, I'm glad he learned on that. I'm glad nobody got stabbed, nobody got hurt out of that. But like, it's better for him to learn that lesson than to learn that lesson later on in life when somebody else would do something else, or, society cracks down on him. What ended up happening was I told him, I was like, I don't know how I could trust you with this knife. I'd have to take it away. But in that moment, God was like, he needs to know that he can be trusted as a man. And so reluctantly, and obviously prayerfully, I said, son, I'm giving this back to you. But if this ever happens again, you're never seeing it again. And he's never, ever gotten close to that. And we still, a few months ago, asked him, do you remember that incident? Remember what happened? And he still remembers it. And that's forging the man in him. That's giving him tools to learn in the inconsequential, to avoid what's down the road.
Yeah, I've heard once that it's better to learn those kinds of things with a loving parent than it is with a judge or a police officer.
Oh, yeah. And how do we have murderers in this world?
Yeah, that's right. What is the problems that you see in men that you meet with? So you meet with men, you talk to them, you engage with them. What's the biggest thing that comes up?
Man, the last 5 interactions I've had with people who are interested in our community are all dealing with ugly custody battles. Which, why did you choose this woman? I think that men are just, we don't have good examples of guys who go deeper than just the surface. We're so good at bottling and stuffing things down. And even whenever we're having the space and I've set the space and it says confidential, it's like, man, some of the shares that I get is just the same old, I had a good week. Nothing to report. Just another regular thing I hear a lot is just going through the motions, right? Just putting in my paces. And this is a mundane way of living. And it's a spiritual war. Better way to destroy the world than to, remove the teeth out of men or remove that violence out of men, to remove this urge to live life to its fullest out of men. Lack of wanting to invest in oneself is to realize that there's a priority. We hold a priority in how we lead our lives. If we don't do that for ourselves, the house that we live in is not going to be nice. It's not taking care of responsibilities, the 7 domains. When we don't lead in those ways, like if you rate yourself, I may ask the audience and rate yourself on a scale of 10 amongst all 7 of those domains. How are you doing in those, right? Can you go up a flight of stairs without huffing and puffing, right? Are you emotionally stable? Like, do you have good thoughts in your mind? Developing yourself spiritually? Do you have mentors who you ask to pray for you, or friends who are there with you? That's the social as well. Occupational, like, are you trading life for money? Like, are you fulfilled in what you're doing? And then you come home and so, man, I rate yourself on those things. How are you doing?
We've talked about purpose. We've talked about taking care of yourself, stewarding what God's given, your body, your mind, your resources, and doing those things not so that you can be the greatest person ever, but because that is how children learn how to live a God-honoring, healthy, productive life. And seeing their dad do, whatever it is that the dad thinks a life should be like, he ought to do those things because his children will see that and mimic him.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately kind of what we've sort of talked about here with the 7 domains, with even the allowing your kids to learn from the inconsequential, that they're going to see, how does dad respond to my inconsequential actions? And that's how I'm going to respond, both maybe to myself and then ultimately probably to my child when I have a kid.
Yeah.
So what's one last final piece of advice that you would give a dad if you had 3 sentences to give him something?
Yeah, we talked about the average. You think that lone wolfing is this cool macho bravado thing. And I think that if you start to think about the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most, that would change everything. If you don't have a good community around you and they keep feeding you toxic things, or they keep reminding you of things that are inconsequential, like your life is going to be inconsequential. And if you don't have that, go and find it. There are great communities out there. You can go to a church locally. You can, get connected in a variety of ways, and just find that community, right? Find that band of brothers who will hold you to a better standard, and not just hold you to one, but also you see the fruits in their life. Because if you're the most interesting or you're the richest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? And if you're the smartest, strongest, most financially stable person in that room, probably time to go find a room where you see the bar and they hold you to that higher bar and they push you to being at that level. I mean, that would change. You can share your heart and not be judged. And I just wouldn't push it back in face for what you've said to me. And this is both for people who have a faith component and don't have a faith component. I think personal development is pretty broad. It goes across everything. So, find those people, be around them, be about them, and man, your life will change.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Theo, for being with me today. I could talk to you for a long time, and I think we would be friends.
For sure. Yeah. You wanted to talk about China. Do you have any questions you have about China that you want me to be completely honest about?
Yeah, I do. I want you to tell people about your ministry in China, and if they can help, how do they do it? How do they jump in there?
Yeah. So yes, they can. Absolutely. Obviously connect with me because, there's a lot of things that I'd rather not say on air, and it's something that we navigate carefully and try to be careful because, for me from an outsider, and when I say outsider, I am living outside of China. When I go and I do something there, and let's just say they don't agree, I can get kicked out. But the people who are local that we have as, local team members, they're not so fortunate. And so the best way to understand our ministry is that we're very nimble, very small, and it's literally tent making. What is tent making? Well, we are using business as a vehicle for ministry. And so we'll create education companies. And for example, we'll do like seminars with, connecting with teachers, principals, education bureau professionals. And in China, it's different. It's funny because, they say communist country, but, it's also very capitalistic in a sense. And so when we do ministry, it's through business, through the vehicle of business. Because when you're coming as an NGO or as a nonprofit, though we are here in North America, and this is what we tell people here locally, there we say business, right? In China, it's very much, what's your motive? What are you doing this for? It's easier almost to understand it as, oh, you're doing it for money. It's good, right? And then they don't think about it. But if we tell them that, oh, we're here to tell you about the love of Jesus, ministry would no longer exist. And that was something that, through tent making, through business, the vehicle of business, we've gotten into areas that no other ministry has ever been able to get into. And so even whenever they purged the nonprofits out of China after the 2008 earthquake, we were one of the only organizations still there. Even through COVID, we were the only ones in there. We were vouched for by schools, by government, on all levels. It was just, at one point they wanted us to teach them how to do VBS because they saw the values and the principles behind what it was we were bringing. And that's God, obviously, right? But that's just how ministry, you adapt. You bring what the country wants it, and that's really what it means to be a cog in the community. Is what do they need? How can I provide it and not be the expert and just trust that, God's going to move. And so, yeah, we are, as a small organization, and obviously given how the world is going and gas is going up like crazy, and one of the first things to go really is support for nonprofits or for ministries, and I'll take the extreme ownership route as well and say that we don't do certain things well, and garnering support and donations is something that we have struggled as an organization. But that would be a great help, and even just prayer, understanding, and hearing the stories that we have, and that helps a lot.
So do they connect with you directly to find out more about this, or do you guys have a website? Or
yeah, we have a newsletter that we will send out, and connecting with me would be another way. We don't have a large footprint for obvious reasons, but that's also not an excuse to not have something like that. And so either a newsletter or I think the best way really is to connect with me. And it's more of a personal thing. I don't enjoy kind of just send you this link and then you just go and get your own information. I think there's a personal aspect to ministry, and we'll also do trips. One of the things that we did a long time ago was also bring a lot of what's your expertise? Okay, fatherhood. You want to go to China and work with fathers, or we have an author who left, a woman who left China, went to Spain and married a Spanish man, and she was writing about her life away from China, and she was very famous, and her name was Echo.
Yeah, Theo and Echo. That's really interesting. I was, speaking of why you wouldn't lock a kid in a cage, that's even a spiritual question, right? For us in the West, we take for granted that it's because they're made in the image of God. Now, maybe a non-Christian wouldn't use that language, right? But that's the reason in the United States that we've come to that conclusion, is because we believe humans have inherent value, right?
Right.
And I was even reading just today, I was reading St. Augustine's Confessions. I'm reading it really slowly. And I came to a part where he was talking about idols and why we don't bow down to idols. And he says something along the lines of, the Israelites bowed their souls, your image. So the idea that they weren't supposed to bow down to idols because humans were made in the image of God, and for a human to bow down before an idol is to put God's image below and in worship of this idol. And I was struck by that, just how profound that really is. I had never thought of it in that way before, but that even for a human to bow down before a created thing like a cow or a bull or any other item, like God says, that's not your position. I made you in my image.
Right.
And my image doesn't bow down to any other God except me. And there's something really profound about that, I think, in the West, for us to go, that's why we elevate humans to where they are in value. And, hence maybe in a different culture where that same spiritual truth isn't held as true, then what reason is there to not lock a kid up in a cage?
Yeah.
I mean, he's annoying and he's disruptive.
Right.
Let's get rid of him.
Right. Yeah. So how do you answer that question, man? Like, I'd love to go to the root and say, yeah, then it's a very godless nation. I don't want to have to say that, but that is the truth. It's not to say historically China knew, right? The history of China is one in which they knew about God. At the very beginning, they knew.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah. So this is a great topic. For your audience, if you go on YouTube and you look up, the evidence of God in ancient China, you'll find a 2-part sermon series that a pastor in Singapore did on the Chinese civilization and how one of the people groups that left the Tower of Babel was the Chinese people. One of the largest unbroken chains of human civilizations, right? And so, and here's a few of the interesting things is that if you go to Beijing and you go to the Temple of Heaven and you go into the throne room, there is a throne that's it's sitting up there and it's like a flight of stairs that leads up to it. There's no picture of any God, there's no deity. It just says the one above all. It's literally a sign that says the one above all, which is Shangdi, which is God. And you'll find even like historical records of things like the comet or the star that led the wise men. And actually one of the things that they believe is that why do we sing the song, We Three Kings of Orient? Mm-hmm. And where's the Orient?
Yeah, it's China.
Right. And what's west of China? Bethlehem.
Yeah. So
there is that, whether it was 3 guys or 1 guy or whatever, there's, and even just like I told you, I couldn't read or write, but even in certain characters in the Chinese language, there are stories of the Bible hidden in them. And so, boat is like, Zhou is like, boat. It's 8-person boat. So it's hidden in there, and he writes it all out. And I highly recommend the video. You'll learn a lot about even emperors who were Christian, who were, talking about things like, oh, the Son of Man has died, just like things in the historical annals.
Oh man, what's his name? Do you remember?
What's the pastor's name? I'll have to find that link and maybe send it to you, and you can post it in the show notes, because like I love watching, because like it's there, and there are multiple civilizations that have talked about or societies that have talked about this flood, this great flood, right? And like just more evidence to prove these things. And so China is it's in our history, it's in our civilization.
That's really neat. Awesome.
Fellow fathers and friends, so glad you could join us for this episode. To stay connected, visit our website at fatherandfriend.com. Sign up for our monthly newsletter or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media sites. Until our next episode, keep showing up, loving deeply, and making an impact for the good of your family. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Father and Friend.